family can travel. And we were all very touched by that, very clever, probably the best handling of time travel because it wasn't about the special effects, but about the personal effects that time travel created and the people who did it. You know, it's like real, this is what I teach, is it's not about the surface, it's about what's underneath. And this film really shows you that you don't need special effects to discuss the effect time travel could have on people. So that was Bill Nighy, and he's been in a bunch of other things. He plays, all his roles are mostly deadpan, and he was particularly well suited for this. It's kind of dry, but there were lots of fun moments in it. Let's start at the beginning. I will talk about that, and it begins with itinerary. Those titles, you know, of the textured wallpaper or painting, or like, didn't even need them. Itinerary, inconvenient, and hope. It's like, okay. I stopped trying to figure out what they meant. Hope I got. But the funniest thing that struck me was very early. First, he's waiting on the beach with that umbrella, and you know the famous painting by Magritte, where it's the man with the umbrella and other things are raining down. He's wearing a bowler hat. It's iconic. That's an absurdist quote, and in a way, it foreshadows his condition. He's out there with an unlimited horizon with no clue as to where he is or what he's looking for. So he has to call his son, Peter, and say, where was it I was supposed to meet you? It was somewhere on the shore. Right. But I thought that was a delightfully funny quote. They didn't have to see as a quote from the art world, just that this guy alone on the beach, and he's kind of lost and he's kind of goofy. It's not even raining and he has an umbrella. The next funny absurd, and then he goes to the ice cream truck, and he doesn't want to talk about ice cream, does he? What does he want to talk about? Anybody?
Coffee.
He wants
coffee, but what's his opening line?
It's about the artwork and
the artwork,
right? Because his son decorates ice cream vans, and the guy, the deadpan expression of the vendor in the truck is hilarious. Even when he's asked, do you have coffee? He doesn't even blink, you know, and it's, you know, and Bill Nighy gets it and sort of shakes his head no, and then yes, I get it, and walks on. So that was funny. And then he gives the business card of his son out, or sorry, it's the flyer out, to the three ladies on scooters, which are pastel colored, which is silly as can be. You know, what is this, even in the, I don't know when it's set, but it's like, regardless, it's out of time. You know, it's one of those, there's no reason for it. So don't ask, it's just silly. And that's very British too.
George straight away.
Yeah. I mean, this is a film that you have to like enjoy in the moment and not ask too much of it, because it only amounts to something in the end. And that's not necessarily a shortcoming. Hannah, how about those toothbrushes? They're action figures. This guy never knew how to talk to his sons, and he's proving it now. Of course, it's all he could pick up at the petrol stop, right? It's like when he saw that they weren't going to make it back tonight, he got toothbrushes. Didn't think of it when he booked the rooms the night before, but it's all this, you know, it's sort of scratching around the surface of his temperament and his personality. Mostly it's the family style. And the son doesn't seem to be provoked by much of it up until this point, although he does get a little provoked in the car when they're driving. And it all begins to take shape 11 minutes in with the first game of Scrabble when they meet the other couple, Arthur and what's her name? I forget her name.
Jenny Agutter.
The actress. Sorry. I try to use the
Jenny Agutter.
She was a classic from the 70s British New Wave. She was in The Bed Sitting Room by Richard Lester and other films I can't remember.
She was in Logan's Run.
Logan's Run too, yeah. And I didn't recognize her first until I saw the end credits. And then, but she was so good and so natural. I really liked her performance. The charming thing, the surprise is, it sort of, the movie begins to show its colors when the wife confesses that they lost their son recently and they're here to view the body. And so you go, whoa, okay, this is a real movie, not just silly. And then there's this touching moment where he holds her hand and the husband appears in the distance and they break their hands. And it's like, we know we're on sensitive territory. Hi, Marvin and Miriam. Glad you got on.
Thank you.
And then there's that hilarious morgue scene where you're on pins and needles. Whose child is it going to be? Right. And there's that, there's some fun filmmaking here. It's not, anybody could do it, but it's thoughtfully done where the camera dollies into the etched glass panes of the autopsy room where the cadavers are stored. And you just see the shadows behind and you don't know what the result is. Yeah, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, that's when and I think maybe I even noticed it before, that so many of these scenes are framed. And that was a perfect frame where a geometric frame.
Yes.
And of course, that frame evokes the picture frame that is so important, the picture of the boys. And of course, that's the shape of a Scrabble tile.
They're all kinds.
It's very aesthetic, very aesthetically developed throughout the movie.
Yeah, but you don't have to see those things, like you don't have to see the umbrella up front other than think it's strange. The quote doesn't matter, but and his sweater he wears in that scene is like vertical and horizontal lines, like the Scrabble board. And he wears it again later in the movie too. And there's a jar of marmite in one of the frames. And there, it's all these, it refers to itself many times over, which is a fun in-joke. But again, if you didn't get it, don't feel badly because you don't need it. It's just there, and the filmmakers got to have some fun too. So for those of us who got it, great, doesn't matter. But after this scene, it's the first time the father and the son, they meet outside and they walk and talk and they refer to him, the missing son. It's the first time we really clearly understand. And why did he walk out? Well, because he used Z in the word zygote, which is an unfertilized egg. And Alan, the dad, thinks it had something to do with the game, and that's why he walked out. So this is typical male blindness. And it's kind of funny when you look back on it, but he's carrying a lot of hidden, unspoken guilt throughout the whole movie. He thinks it's all his fault. Now he's mistaken in what's his fault. It had nothing to do with the game. And that reveal, this is, I'm not sure if I like this moment or not, when he bursts back into the waiting room, he says, come on, let's go, it wasn't him. I don't know. That didn't feel like it was in keeping with the character for me. I expected something wittier or more embarrassed, or it was like, it was intentionally rushed, and I don't get it, but it didn't hurt the film at all. I just questioned that. Did anybody else have a problem with that? Did it throw you? No. Okay.
It didn't throw me, but for a couple of seconds there, I thought he was lying to protect his wife.
Okay. Well, that's a good red herring.
So,
The films do. They get you thinking one direction so they can switch.
Right.
And that would be an appropriate reaction. Let's get the hell out of here. I'm going to tell you privately. I don't want to see the relief on their face because of our grief. And that's a concept that comes up. It could be bad either way, couldn't it? Whichever news you got. Right, we'll come to that scene later, but if it is your son, you're grief-stricken. If it's not your son, you're doomed to not knowing.
Your grief.
Yeah, your grief has no substance. It's just
a minute ago, you said, of course, the son didn't walk out because of the game. How do you know that?
We'll come to that scene. We'll come to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it really took me. No, I remember it took me the whole film to realize what it was. There's a line in the movie that will help you. It's easy to miss.
You know what's interesting, Jim, is I watched the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, all right, whatever this is, Jim has a scene. I'll probably know in the last scene. That's the way I was watching the film.
Well, some movies are like that, and they have to earn their keep, though. They have to keep you interested and engaged enough.
Well, I was engaged in the Scrabble, which I don't think really was important, except
No,
it was the, it
It's a
was the,
motif. It's a red
motif.
herring.
but it's a red herring, but I had a connection to Scrabble.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in a family that played Scrabble on occasion with a father who, God bless him, was a wonderful dentist and a terrible speller. And the last time we played, he got so angry with us that we never played again because he insisted that there was a D in banana. And everybody just went crazy and said, that's it. We are through with you. No more Scrabble. And then one of my daughters has a family that everybody from the time the kids were quite young, like 8, 9 years old, had to memorize all the 2 and 3 letter words in the dictionary in order to play the game with her parents.
Okay. And was she investigated for child abuse?
No, but it was one of those big things that we
Yeah.
couldn't play Scrabble with them.
Okay. Who else has played Scrabble?
But
in
it
their
was fun.
family or play Scrabble today? Anybody? Occasionally? Nobody. Okay. Thank you for your confessionals. It's fun. You know, it's like maybe not every night.
I
Like
played it. I have to say I played it.
Yeah.
I like the thing about the jazz, the comment about the jazz music, and you can't.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was good because I like jazz piano.
I think the Scrabble game was one of the very important things in the movie
Yeah.
to explain this father's personality and why the children were not liking to play with him. He was obsessed with this. It was something.
Okay, why was he obsessed with it? Let's cut to the chase, because this is what the movie's about. Why do you think? Before his son ran out, why was he obsessed with it?
It was maybe a distraction from the fact that his wife had died. He was obsessed. I don't know, you give the answer, but this was very important in the movie. That's why it was.
The game is a symbol, but only as a game, as a substitute for something else.
It's how he communicated.
That's right. Kelly.
Labels and Scrabble.
Labels and Scrabble. This is his substitute.
Words.
Real communicate. And words.
The thing was, he didn't communicate with them. They resented him for it.
Right, but he didn't know that. You see,
The boy that left got up in the middle of the game and left. That was very important. It was like they were fed up with his compulsion with this game and not connecting with them, is the way I saw it.
I think you're correct, but he had the compulsion with the game because it was his way of connecting with his sons, because he had no mother for them. And he thought that he was doing his sons a favor by this intense engagement over Scrabble. And what they wanted was something else from him and never got it.
Mhm.
Especially Peter, the older son, who spent 20 years in the shadows of this ghost who they didn't even know was alive or not. And to me, that's the overarching theme of the movie, that we look in the wrong places and can't really see what's being communicated and what isn't. Carol, you had a question?
Thank you. This is wonderful, this analysis. Grief and dealing with grief, each in everyone's own way and pace, to me was the underlying theme. The style was individual. I understand how Peter felt like that substitute for the G.I. Joe, not the real G.I. Joe, and not the prodigal son. But the grief that each one was trying to deal with and express and still stay connected, even if it were only by right angles on a Scrabble board, was still an expressed desire to connect. And only through the storytelling, which was very artful and not random, did it finally, for me, show that the journey to lovingly connect and accept the loss, even of the time where they didn't get what they needed was accomplished. And what did he say? Make the best of it. We'll accept it, make the best of it.
Mhm. Right, and good analysis. Thank you. Let's move on with content, because you'll see we'll keep circling back to this. It's just woven through the whole film. Now, the subject of second best comes up quite early, around 15 minutes in. We didn't have a real Scrabble game. We had the paper game you had to punch the chips out from. You always gave us second best, Dad. Why? And this comes up really strongly at the end, in that sometimes second best is all you got, so you should live with it. But that's, and I think at that point, Bill Nye says it's because you had no mother. I didn't have a mother for you, so I was a second best mother. It's all about people's sense of insufficiency, when if Alan had only understood what the boys needed from him, that would have been sufficient to replace enough of the mother to help them with their lives. And sometimes men are blind to it. I mean, women as well. My mother was part of the family, and I think she knew more than she let on, but that's just my own take on it. This is a story of like humanizing these guys, and Peter, the older son, had it all along. He knew that the dad was, there's one, after the first visit to the house is, why do you walk away when I'm trying to have a conversation with you? They begin to get into it, and then Bill Nye leaves. You leave the field when you have an approach avoidance conflict with a problem. You just decide it's not there. It's called denial. Let's move on. There's some other weird things, that there was a 3-way split screen in black and white of a young boy playing Scrabble. It made me ask, well, why is that there? And it never really explained itself. I think the filmmakers felt they needed to reference a time long ago when Scrabble was important to them. I don't think it did much. And there's another one of those, I'll say it now in case we don't get to it, when Peter goes out to the shipyard at the end, and the gruff old sailor says, oh, he knows handle himself on a boat. And then there's the paper cutout art of a boat sinking in the waves. And then we cut back to Bill Nye in a blanket shivering over a fire. Okay, so he capsized. But do you really need that thing in the middle? I think not, and I think the filmmakers were afraid that people couldn't make the leap from he's okay on a boat to him shivering and wet. And, sometimes you try and correct, as a filmmaker, you try and correct mistakes that aren't there, and you wind up making a bigger mistake. And
that brought me back to the paper Scrabble board.
Yeah, I could say I might. But the artifice of memory, and they did go there before. Remember that this location, Ainsdale, is where they used to go when, just to get out of town. And the caravan is the trailer that they come upon in the woods. That's theirs. They've been there before, which is one reason why Peter knew where to go. Brad, and then Donna.
Well, I don't think the choice of Scrabble is gratuitous. I think it's essential to this movie. Scrabble is a word game, and this movie is all about communication. I mean, and what's interesting about Scrabble is you've got a bunch of words, none of which they have a very loose connection with each other. They don't tell a coherent story. So I don't think it's gratuitous at all. I think
I didn't mean that.
It couldn't have been Monopoly. It had to be Scrabble.
Scrabble, right. And I think what you're saying, that the Scrabble board is a reflection of how words don't necessarily connect out of context. You put them next to each other, they don't mean a thing. And it's like the boy saying to the dad, playing Scrabble every night doesn't bring us closer to you. We need a direct connection, not this mechanical connection that is the Scrabble board, or linguistic one. Then there's the tailor shop, which is pleasant interlude. And is that when the first time? No, in the tailor shop, he's just contemplating by himself after they come back from wherever the morgue was. Okay, so in this next scene, this is what the next scene we meet the mother, Susie, with young Jack. And she's musing to herself, Jack is lost playing his video game. And she's wondering, well, if we find him, we could be really disappointed, you know, or he could have a life of his own and we feel really hurt because he excluded us from this rich life of his, which is a hint, a toss forward to the end of the movie. And she says, on the other hand, if we don't find him, then we're still lost. And you know, there's no good solution to this, just like there's no good solution to identifying the body in the morgue. And I thought that was really great to have somebody verbalize that in front of us in a very nice way without, you know, being too pretentious about it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We don't really know that much about his past
No.
in terms of his personality, but it seemed to me that what they were describing was somebody really suffering post-traumatic stress disorder from the loss of his son. He's got the loss of his wife and the loss of the son.
Sure.
And it really raises a fundamental issue. What's, you know, we always hear the refrain that one of the worst things that could happen to a family is to lose a child.
Yes.
But this movie raises another issue. Maybe it's worse than death is to not know what happens to it.
Right. Thank you. That's a very good point. And PTSD is relevant. You know, PTSD survivors, military veterans, often have obsessive behavior. They keep seeing images, the horrible images that hurt them so much, or moments in their service. Just like Scrabble is a compulsive thing with him. It's obsessive. So yeah, there's damage. I mean, PTSD, you know, we didn't have a word for PTSD until after the Vietnam War, when all these vets came back and, you know, were horribly treated with poor health care, and tons were homeless. There's still a Vietnam Vets charitable organization now that you can donate your used books to and other things. I do. And there's still fallout generations later, just like we talk about Holocaust survivors and their PTSD. It lasts and it's passed on through the damage that one person receives. Everybody they come into contact it gets a contact hurt from that damage. Now, also when they're back at Peter and Susie's house, Alan talks about Vegemite, which, you know, is like a hydrolyzed vegetable protein. It's like soy sauce or something. It's a umami flavor that you can add to weak British cooking. And he says there's no marmite, which is the French version.
Marmite.
There's no marmite in Canada because they won't disclose all its ingredients. So there's Vegemite instead, but it's a poor second. So again, we're back to this theme of being a poor substitute, and like, you know, the perfect is the enemy of the good is one phrase, where because it's not perfect, you discount any merit that something else might have. And that's not how you can live your life very happily. You know, you have to work around the flaws in others, or embrace them, or tolerate them, or tear your hair in private, however you deal with it. But that's real. And unless you want to go without hydrolyzed vegetable protein, you have to embrace either Marmite or Vegemite, you know, depending upon where you live. It's cute, you know, but they're having fun with this theme. And that's why I noticed there is a Vegemite jar in the caravan, I think. I don't know why.
Oh my God.
Behind some papers that he's shuffling through. It may be back home. I'm not sure. Okay, then we go to Inconvenient. That's like the middle of the film. And there's this hilarious wordplay. When he meets his son, Jack's playing a video game. It's a shooting game, like, I forget the name, you know, some warfare. And he says, "Is that you, the one with the big breasts?" And he's embarrassed. "Okay, I'm sorry, bosoms." And then they have this wordplay, you know, glands, bazookas, this, that. It's like, it's this synonymous warfare. And it's, you know, they're basically saying there's so many words for it, and they're tossing it back and forth between them. It's a way of engagement. It's fun. And I think both of them get a thrill out of that. It's very funny. It's the longest wordplay, but there are other instances. There's one with the young girl later in the picture. And it's just, the filmmakers are having delightful British fun with it. Take a moment. We know what we're playing with here, so let's kick this one around. And they do. Did anybody else enjoy that exchange?
I thought that was,
Yes.
I thought that showed a different side. You talk about communication, but now he can communicate with his grandson, and he develops a communicative level with him, which indicated to me that the trauma of losing the other son was such a barrier. That's
Oh,
what
yeah.
he's been a-
He knew. He didn't want to lose what little relationship he had with his son. Remember, the son's relationship to Alan grows throughout the film. When Alan takes him to the tailor shop, he says, "I've never been here before." And he tries a jacket on him that was his once, and he refits it for him. It's like, wow, this guy's cool. And suddenly there's a whole new relationship that the two have, and it becomes very important. Also interesting to note, he says, "Oh, it's sluggish here and it speeds up there. Do you want me to reboot it for you?" Like it's the grandparent helping the grandchild, with a computer problem. It's usually the reverse. And I say, if you can't get on, call a grandchild.
Call you.
What?
May I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I have two train sets. My son loves Budweiser. I have the two train sets, the head car that I'm sending for Hanukkah. But I just want to say, I write letters because they're so far away. This movie, one day, I hope it'll be a movie about my life, but I can relate to so much of this grief and separation and what if this and what if that. People don't know the whole story. But playing music for my son on my tablet, he just loved it. And my daughter goes, "Mom, that's beautiful," and sing me another song. So, there's hope for reconciliation in families, and music heals, and people try to get traumatized and things happen. But in this movie, sometimes, always, never, it seems like you think there's not going to be an emotional connection, but all along through the film, I see little tidbits of beautiful emotional connections of healing and coming back together as a family. And
Right.
that's
Thank you. Music was your way of connecting with your son. So it's understandable that a parent would reach out. Risa?
Yeah, you talk about that Taylor scene. The thing that struck me was about the buttons. Sometimes, never,
Yeah.
always.
Always, yeah.
And then we never talk about how that plays out in the movie. And I wasn't 100% sure of where it came from or where it went. I know where it came from, but I don't know where it went.
Well, I could invent reasons, but the key is always, sometimes we come close, we never really meet, but we always need each other. The middle button is the always. And what he's giving him tailoring advice. When you wear a three-piece jacket, a three-button jacket, 3 buttons on the sleeve, I think, and 3 buttons in the middle, you sometimes will button the top one and always button the middle one, but you never button the bottom one, because that makes it look like a double-breasted blazer or a straitjacket. So it implies too much constraint of the person inside, but the other two are just tidy. I think that's what that means sartorially. You can make up your mind as to what it means with the themes of the film. But it's a choice, it's a choice thing. And he clearly was unable to choose otherwise during his life. I want to go back to what Jay said. I think maybe something Carol said, or Donna. It's like this movie is universal. We can all see ourselves in some of the characters and some of the relationships and some of the problems, the communication problems that people have. So it's finding the personal in the universal. And because each of us are human beings, if we're only willing to look at ourselves, we'll see some of our own lives reflected in the movie. And why are we willing to do that when we watch it? Because it's engaging, because it's fun, because it's witty, because it's intriguing. It's a bit of a mystery. It's all these reasons why movies work on us, and they get you. Whoever you are, a good movie can get you. Not everybody. This movie, didn't work on a lot of people. Who ever heard of it before? And it's only 4 years old. But it's that's what movies can do to us, and why I've always loved them since I discovered them. But it's like it's a way of looking inside of the audience and saying, I know what you're feeling, or you have felt this before, or I think this will resonate with you because I think this is a universal truth or a universal occurrence or situation. So, you know, in many ways, you know, this modest little film touches on everything, which is what I said this morning in Torah study.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What do you think I think, well, I want to know what you think makes a really hit movie, like that touches everyone, is the reality of people trying to love one another and forget their mistakes and move on and admit their mistakes, and we're all only human, like Rabbi Leader says. But that's what I think makes a hit movie. When it touches everyone.
Right, but everybody comes to it with something different. So, and I know from the many film discussions we've had and that I've hosted elsewhere, everybody sees a different movie. I just try and ground us in the facts of the movie so we can shape the reactions, because when everybody sees the same picture, then we can understand each other's reactions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we teach each other in these groups about, oh, I never saw it that way before. Or how could anybody see it that way? It was totally wrong, factually wrong. Or, you know, it's like, that's a wacky idea, or it's not a wacky idea because I never saw it that way before.
Mm-hmm.
So we, you know, that's why I try, as much as I enjoy talking and breaking these films down, I really try and toss it back to you, because the truth of it is in your reactions. What did the movie make you feel? And that's the measure of a movie. You know, it's, and the lucky ones touch many people. Miriam. You're muted, Miriam.
Thank you, Steve. Jim, I mean.
That's okay. Miriam, you're muted. Lower left corner, click on the microphone once. There you go.
You just asked Jim, what did you think? What did you feel? And I felt that I wanted very much to like this movie. I felt, and I sought out all the positive things. The photography was very unusual. It was dark most of the time. The frames were quite artistic, very purposefully done most of the time. It made it a little more sinister because of the dark photography. I went along with all that. Then what was I supposed to feel when he said, it's not him, it's not him. He comes out, he's very brief, he's very succinct. We don't know what his true feelings are. I didn't quite get to the depth of what he was saying. Was there any depth? Was he relieved? Was he happy? Was he what? All of you seems to have been much more clairvoyant than I was. I didn't know. I was confused.
Well,
nobody else seems to have been confused but me. Was this his son? Was it not his son?
Well, we learned later it was not his son.
It's not.
That's right. We learned at the end that it was not his son.
We learned quite soon after that.
Sooner, because the woman comes to him. Yes,
yeah.
The guy's wife is very taken with him. But you all seem to have known that. I personally, maybe I'm just not as smart. I did not know the things that you people knew. I felt that lacking. I was blaming myself for it.
Yeah.
I could have blamed the film a little more for that too.
Well, Miriam,
what happened? I'm just going to end with this sentence. I had feelings, then they were kind of conflicted out. Then they were brought back in again. Then they were out. And I did not have a solid feeling throughout this film. Thank you.
I understand how that could throw you, that scene. It threw me because I didn't understand the tone. Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he trying to get out? It went nowhere and there were no repercussions from it. So oftentimes filmmakers make mistakes or they build flaws into their scenes or their scripts. So
do they purposely do this?
No, believe me, they wanted you to get it, but they'd already shot it and realized it doesn't explain itself. you know, it's like that was a problem they overlooked and couldn't solve instead of putting in the drawing of the ship sinking. You know, it's like they're not perfect. This filmmaker, it's his first feature film, but he'd done quite a bit of television in England. And, you know, I'm glad he did it. It's a sensitive feeling film, and it's an original script. So bravo for that. It's not an adaptation. But no, you're absolutely right. I totally understand your feelings. It was like, and that's a problem when you get so far thrown off by something like that. It's hard to get back on the wagon again, you know, because you're just, it's upsetting. And this is very common. So that's why filmmakers have to be very careful to keep the audience in a very short leash and let them have their own feelings. But you have to make sure they understand your intention with every scene. And this got away from them. Anybody else feel differently? Risa?
I feel the same way. I feel the same way.
Okay,
I didn't feel any of the emotions that you expressed or others expressed. In fact, I didn't feel much emotion at all. I watched the whole movie, and I was really anxious for this evening to see, well, I must have missed something. It wasn't a bad movie. It was a nice movie. It was an okay movie. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't get as much out of it as everybody else. But Miriam, thank you for explaining, but I didn't feel that I was dumb and just didn't.
No, it doesn't.
I didn't hit myself.
While we have the frame, I'd like to also say there was reference made to when the father comes out after reviewing the body and says, and has that abrupt, disregard, wants to leave immediately, saying it wasn't it. There was no feeling for the couple that was still there, where the chances were very likely, therefore, that it was their son. Right. He had no feeling.
It was rude.
For people.
It was rude.
I think it was all. Where did I first come? I think maybe right in that scene, aware that he was seeing the gentleman there as possibility of being his son.
No.
Well, when does that start? When did you first feel that he was looking at that guy as a possibility of being his son?
The man in that scene at the morgue?
Yes, the guy they played Scrabble in the motel or hotel that night, and he thought that guy could be his son.
I don't know where you got that idea. The age wasn't right, you know, because he's almost a colleague
almost the same age
of Alan, so couldn't have been his son.
I felt that that's really funny, because I really felt strongly that he thought, age differently, but I thought he saw his son in this guy who played Scrabble so well.
There you go. We see different things. And I wonder what made you think that way, because again, you have to control that as a filmmaker, because, did it lose you for the rest of the movie until you saw him again and when he reunites with his wife? Did it throw you off? Unmute yourself. Unmute, Risa.
He's constantly looking for living people who could be his son. And that happens a lot with people who lose people. Yes. You see them walking in the street. It looks like it jogs you. What's the right word? But it grabs you that, oh my God, it looked like it was my mother.
Okay.
But
my question,
you know what I mean? So that's what I saw here a lot.
Did it affect the rest of the movie for you, or did you recover?
Well, I saw the movie through that he felt that this guy could be his son.
Okay.
Who else would play? What was it, Zoe? Who else would play that word that he played in the hotel?
Yeah. I mean,
if it wasn't his son.
There are only like 112 two-letter words, and
exactly
all players know them. So
that's right.
It's common.
Well, I know that, but
that's what Peter's comment is. It could be anybody. You think you detected the style of my brother, but there are 500,000 people who play Scrabble online. By the way, at least there was at the time the movie was made. So it's interesting. Brad. You're muted, Brad.
Yeah, Risa, I didn't feel that, but Carol, I agree with you entirely. This was a movie about loss, and you don't have to lose a child. It doesn't have to be at that level. If you have a family get together and not everybody can come, and you focus on the people that aren't there instead of the people that are there, I mean, we all are affected. You don't, like I say, it doesn't have to be the loss of a child. It's when your focus is on the absent rather than the present, the people who are present, that you're missing something. And what I loved about the movie was how Peter tried so hard to connect with his father that he went so far as imitating his brother and the way the brother played Scrabble as a way of finding that bridge to connect with his father. He was willing to sublimate his own personality and assume the personality of his brother just to get that connection that was missing in his life. And I thought that was so touching that he would go to that extreme.
And we don't know that until the scene at the picnic table when when it's revealed that Peter has been ghosting him as skinny thesaurus, I think. Carol?
Thank you. And Brad, to follow up on that, yes, loss, grief, and whether it's an author of a book or director and writer of a film, the storytelling, it's not just arbitrary. They get to choose what the characters are named and where they go and what color the door is and all of those things. The song the pop song, rock song that I think the other man sang in the band with, it was a backup singer, and that they were getting on a disc in the car when Peter and Alan are driving for the first time in the red sports car, was Nothing But a Heartache. Nothing but a heartache. I mean, it's not arbitrary. It's messaging to us, right? And it's sad, it's hard, and they're all hurting.
Right, they are all hurting, everybody in their own ways.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. This movie is about getting stuck. People get stuck, and it's very difficult to get out of the position they find themselves in. So what was the trigger in this movie that got him unstuck? It wasn't absolutely clear to me. It sort of evolved, but there doesn't seem to be a real trigger.
I think that the answer is in the last scene. He's continually chasing after Michael, including this figure in the wood. We see first fleetingly behind him in the trailer, and he follows him to the picnic table.
I have an answer.
What?
Great question, Jay. If you don't mind, can I offer?
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's in the title. I think the moment when the grandson, a young man, was taken by him, and it was sometimes always never, that this was the vehicle to connect and to get unstuck, because there was joy in that process of this reformation of this kid. And there was something that was imbued with life.
Yes, absolutely. But the actual reveal.
Can I, excuse me,
Go
can
ahead,
I ask Jay something? Jay said till he got unstuck. Now, when do you think he got unstuck? I didn't feel he was unstuck. I didn't feel the movie ended with the feeling that we should take away that he went through something and now he's over it. I didn't get the feeling he was over it. And I wasn't quite sure what he was supposed to be over. To stop looking for his son? to decide that there is no answer to his question, to become a different person. None of that came through to me. I'd like to ask, hey, where did it come through? Where now?
Jay, do you want to take that on?
Where did he get
Part of Jay's question, I think.
Well, in a sense, I think I can answer it. But let me start with the premise. This movie is about the complexity of life. Nothing is simple. I mean, if you want to watch a Western, you have the good guys and the bad guys. But this movie demonstrates the complexity of life and how people can get so involved in a point of view that they can't get away from it. That's what I meant by getting stuck. And what he seems to capitalize on, and I think you're right, Jim, that the relationship with the grandson, I think, is the key to getting him unstuck. He begins to see, well, there's more to life than just my wallowing in the problems I have of having lost this. And it's time, and he's willing to move on. And I thought, and nobody's commented on, I thought one of the great scenes of the movie is the bath scene, which shows again his willingness to become engaged at a level that he apparently had not been willing to become engaged in before, because now he's taken up with this woman. And I thought the bath scene was a great scene.
I thought it was very funny when she comes out of the other bathroom. But let's dive ahead. This may take a while to process. It's that very last scene when he chases the hooded guy into the forest, crosses the road. There's the hooded guy sitting at a picnic table, and he says something to him, and he pulls down his hood, and it's revealed to be Peter. And would you fancy a game of Scrabble? And he knows he has to engage. And it's kind of, maybe it's the writing, and dry and oblique, but it gets back to this talk about second best. And remember, we haven't mentioned prodigal son, the son who moves away, and the father who stays home with the other son is so overjoyed when the prodigal son returns that he throws a big celebration, and the son who remained loyal gets nothing. And Peter feels like he's the second son, even though he's firstborn, and he's not the one who went away. So it's clearly him. And he says, I'm number two. And sometimes you just have to make do with what you have. And that's where it's, that comes after the revelation that, oh, so you're the one who's been playing games with me all along. And the response from Peter is, I'm sorry. Not, I'm sorry, no, I didn't. I'm sorry I did that to you to lead you on, but it was the only way of engaging with you that I had, which was the whole point of the misuse of Scrabble, their whole life together, but it's all he had left. That's how, Jay, you were alluding to how people miss each other, because they have different points of view that exclude the others. They can't imagine how somebody else sees them or the relationship. So Miriam, in answer to your question, I think that's when the turn happens, when it's revealed that Peter, who says, I'm all you've got in that scene, and so take advantage of me. Now, it follows then, Alan goes home and he sees the guitar case against the wall by the fireplace, and it says Michael Mellor in Dymo label tape. Right? He takes the label off the case. He goes to the picture of Michael and takes it off the picture, and he puts the Dymo label on the guitar case. And this follows a moment where he's really reflecting upon what is he going to do next. And he takes the guitar to the beach scene. And this is where the change, Miriam, plays out. He gives the guitar to Peter. Peter starts playing. And it's basically a song about, I'm all you've got, so love me. And there's this pan around the fire from person to person to person. And it even crosses the two young lovers, right? and then it ends on an empty chair, meaning that chair will never be filled.
That was Elijah's chair.
Okay. That wasn't filled either. So it's a very Jewish film. Thank you for pointing that out, Jay.
If it was Elijah's chair, somebody is about to have a bris. Maybe he's going to be born again and have a bris or something, a circumcision.
And by the way, that was the last image in the film. So it's like, accept your losses, but live in the present with what you have. Brad?
Well, I think that's the ambiguity at the end of the film. Getting back to Miriam's question, because that empty chair is still there.
Yeah.
There's still an emptiness. They haven't moved on. He hasn't moved on, to focus completely on the living. There's still, the last thing we see is the empty chair that's still there.
And it's probably
So
always.
I think it's an ambiguous ending in terms of, is he unstuck or is he still stuck?
Well, no, I think he's smiling at his relatives, at the family. And if you watch the ending again, put the lyrics up on subtitles and you read them as the camera pans around from face to face, I think you'll get that it's basically love the one you're with.
I had a slightly different take on the empty chair. I thought the symbolism of the empty chair is, it's an empty chair. That's it. Get on with it.
Okay, you could describe it that way. That's totally fair. So that's that last scene. The last two scenes are what made it really satisfying for me. It pulled it all together, and the smile on Bill Nye's face at the end around the campfire sort of says it all. He looks back at his son. He's one of the few people in that 360-degree pan where he looks backwards at his son. Everybody else is not looking at somebody else except for the two young lovers. And I thought it was poetical, and films can do that. That's, the symbolism like that works, on people.
And also the guitar, which had Michael's label on it.
Yeah.
The dad takes it off, and then his son Peter is playing it. And
right.
so they're
passing the torch.
moving forward.
You're most important to me now. Right.
Jim, can I ask, did you really have the feeling that everything was tied up nicely and it left you with a satisfactory feeling? It did not do that to me, and I'm glad it did it to you. Why? I don't think he would ever have improved his relationship with Peter. I don't think it was going to happen. And it left me very sad. Peter suffered, but the father did not suffer as much as Peter did, nor did the father realize in full depth the suffering that the first son, who was always the second son in his own eyes, because he felt he was not the first son in his father's eyes. I felt that the father was not going to correct that.
Okay, let me back up a second because I think we're missing some important points.
I don't know how you know
The
that.
last scene. This thing of there's a riff at the end where they go over the beautiful words like lambent and other exotic words we rarely use in language, and saying it's simpler than that. It comes down to the two-letter word. And in a way, the message of the film is communication is simpler than the complex words you can build. It's basically a one-to-one relationship. And you have to, know how to decipher that language, not the complex language that is English. He says, I realized at the end it was mom dying, that drove him away, for somebody who asked that question. It's the loss of the mother, he realizes at the end, that made Michael get up and storm out. He was so damaged and so hurt and felt he would get no comfort or solace from his brother or his father, because all they did was wordplay.
Yeah.
So he runs from the void, the absence of communication and warmth and understanding. As the youngest, he probably felt the loss the most. You know, he was the baby of the family. And I have some familiarity with that, and it's a real phenomenon. And Bill Nighy also says, Miriam, if you can remember, you know, I thought it was something to do with the game and the word zygote. Instead, I should have pursued him. I should have gone out to protect him. So he missed his calling as a parent, you know, because he was so wrapped up in the game and in this meaningless meaningfulness that he imbued the game with. You know, played it well, but missed, you know, did the battles, but played the game poorly. The war, lost the war. And of course, he says at the very end, what I'm really scared of is dying before I sort all this out. I think he says that at the picnic table. And he realizes that he was playing a ghost when he was playing online. Yes, it was his other son, but the point is he was chasing a vapor, a ghost, an apparition that he wanted to be there, but wasn't, and probably will not be for him. So I hope that explains his change of mind, so you can see when he smiles in the beach chair that there's a contentment we haven't seen on his face before. That's how I read it, and that's why it was enough for me. Now, go ahead.
But the big thing at the end was now he had this grandson. He had another chance, and it's common for in troubled families for the generation gap makes it easier to make the connection.
Yeah, strong connection.
And this grandson loved him.
Yes.
Loved him. And there was so much jealousy with his own son and so on and so forth, and so much history. This came fresh, and I thought that is why at the end he felt better and was smiling, not because it was going to be so great with this other son. Yeah.
You can write your own script after the ending, but you can write your own script as how you want to.
And that's true.
It carried on after the story, but you're so right about the grandson. The grandfather gave him a new life because with the new clothes, the jackets, he could finally approach the girl he liked and begin to form a relationship with her. And we realized later on, she always thought he was kind of interesting and wanted to connect with him. So in a way, he gave his grandson the gift of life and connection and relationships. And so that's a very sweet part of the movie. So I think you're right to call that out. Any other observations on this?
Yes, I do, Jim. If I had to think of a word, I can't think of another movie where we had so much depth as to what meaning there was, not what our various interpretations were, what the real meaning of. I guess I come up with the word obscure. I think that this movie was more obscure than anything we have seen recently. I feel like I'm looking at a piece of modern art and looking at it, and people see different interpretations in it, but it's really what the artist's view and whatever is really unknown. We're all putting our own interpretations on it, but it's you know, in other conversations we've had, some of us have missed some things. We've disagreed maybe on a point or two or whatever. But here we really had to dig deep to understand or try to put meaning into what we've all seen.
Well, that can be an asset. Thank you for that. That can be an asset or a liability, depending upon.
Yes. I understand it cuts both ways.
Yeah, I think, Frank, if you saw it one more time, if you have 90 minutes, I think it wouldn't be such a cipher to you. I think it would be clear that there's this longing to connect that everybody has. And it's the story of how each of them makes a little bit of progress.
Well, certainly I'd have the advantage of having the benefit of this discussion. So it will, and that would help, actually.
Okay, but movies should be built for the first time viewer. Howard, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I had a little bit to say. Something that I thought was significant, notable in the movie was the color palette. It seemed like, unless I had my set adjusted wrong, maybe, but to me it looked like everything was really 100% saturated and 100% high contrast.
It was beautiful.
And-
I thought it was beautiful.
And the colors were amazing. I mean, some of the outdoor scenes, it looked like somebody had been had to go out and paint all the bushes in order to get their shade of green that whoever was photographing it wanted it to have. And the other thing that was coupled with was some weird vehicles. There were some strange, like that ancient Austin Healey, the red Austin Healey convertible, and the ice cream truck, weird looking ice cream truck with the little ice cream cone in front, and that strange two-wheeled camper in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
No road. What this had to do with the movie, I do not know, but
It's eccentric, It's
maybe
all
it was
about-
so you could say it was whimsical, but
Yeah.
other than that, I don't see much connection with.
Well, if you were looking at all that and not the themes, it didn't do itself any favors for making the other stuff more attractive to you. You got to control that. I didn't have a problem with that. The saturated colors, the boys' room and his living room were just
I didn't have any problem. I'm not saying I had a problem with it. It stood out. It was very notable.
I thought it was beautiful. I thought made the movie more interesting.
I know the bright colors. Thank you, Howard. I thought that colors stood out to me too. The tanking ship was bright red. The car, the Triumph, was bright red. But also the moment when Jack, the grandson, comes to breakfast for the first time, that his mother goes, whoa, she's startled because she's never seen him at breakfast before. But the kitchen also has a fuchsia, shocking pink, fuchsia cabinet with bright yellow accents. And
why he didn't say it's his son? Why didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, that's all over the film, and oops, sorry, that was me. Yes, Miriam. Unmute.
Why did he not come out and say, "This is my son," when he saw the son?
I can't answer that. It's not fair. He just,
It wasn't his son.
it wasn't his son.
It was not. Okay, do we learn at the end that it was not his son, or it was his son?
From the beginning, it wasn't, because in the scene when Jenny Agutter appears in a towel coming out of the other bathroom, it's revealed that I left him because this losing our son split us up. So it's just something you missed, but it was pretty clear all along for most of us that it was
She
not
saw
his.
the picture. She saw the picture
Like Marvin
of
was,
his son. She saw the picture, and she recognized that it was a fellow.
Yeah, she
the-
cries in his living room, right?
yes.
So it had to be his son.
No.
Why didn't he?
Picture reminded her of her own son, and that's why she calls her husband and says, "I need you," and he comes and
Yeah.
gets her.
Jim, have these filmmakers, the filmmaker of this particular production, done other things that were
Nothing that
equally
you would have seen. A
serious?
lot of British television,
Pardon me?
and he's done a lot of British television.
British television.
And I mean, some of the filmmakers we've looked at, like Ritesh Batra, who did The Sense of an Ending and an Indian film.
Well, certainly this story could not have been suited for television. It couldn't be fitted into an hour or whatever it would be.
No, they don't make television movies much anymore, but the role of television for showing movies has been relegated to the streaming services.
Yeah.
So it's like it doesn't matter how you get it anymore as long as you can get it. But I forget how, I think I was just bouncing around on Amazon looking at trailers or YouTube, and I was looking at a trailer for upcoming films, and then this popped up. And I'll look at anything that Bill Nye is in, just like, there's so many actors that we love that you'll consider watching anything they're in because they're just so magnetic on the screen.
And thank you, Jim, for giving us this movie. It's a movie we never would have seen on our own if it weren't for you.
Well, that's what I do all day, much to my wife's dismay. It's got to be 10 to 1, and I have very high standards for the group because I don't want to show you something that's merely a Jewish film, whatever that means. And I don't want you to show you something that's just merely fun. Although, remember we saw this film Fisherman's Friends about the shanty singing group?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And in a way, it was like this film. It wasn't really about that much, but it was so clear. That was clearer than this film in the emotional development of the characters that we wound up analyzing every scene as to what each scene meant relative to each character who was in them and the overall shape of those relationships as it went through the film. And it's got to have that kind of staying power for me to bring to you because, I'm not going to bring you an action picture, it's like, it's not about anything. There's nothing under the surface. Miriam.
I thank you for the suggestion that we see it again. I think, I don't know where I'll ever find the time, but I'm going to try to. I think I will try to see this movie again.
Okay,
I think after our discussion, it was Frank who used the word obscure, and I loved the word, Frank, that you chose. It was an obscure movie. And perhaps when I see it the second time, I will see it differently, more enjoyably, although it was a good film. And I appreciate that suggestion that we see it again. Thank you.
I think you will. It won't be as obscure the second time. Now, we saw another film called Drive My Car about the Japanese playwright. And that was pretty obscure too. But there was something underneath every scene and the relationships that builds and builds. And when I first saw that film, I said, I think that was a very important film, but I can't say why. I had to watch it another time. So, good films can do that. But they have to earn it. They can't just be obscure and inaccessible, by intention. It has to be deeper and more carefully crafted. So it takes a while for us to see the patterns of relationships and the causation from one scene to another and the cross references. I mean, look, if you have to study every film with a microscope, it may not be a great film. On the other hand, great films do merit looking at all the details from front to back. And then you see how well crafted they are. And I tell my students, we're going to show you how the sausage is made. And hopefully you'll still love sausage after it because there'll be more to admire when you see what goes into it. So that it's not just the fun you had out of it, but that you saw the intricacy of the story or the relationships or whatever else is in it that enriches it for you. And all that was premeditated. As we found in, I think Fern's not with us right now, but she's the one who loved Fisherman's Friends because she had never looked at a film specifically looking at the development of relationships in each scene and how they change from scene to scene. And it was like, films are built this way. They're built with that kind of intentionality and creative intention. And the good ones may not reach everybody, but good ones sort of reach a lot of people because even if you don't get all the details, you get the feeling that connects all the choices they made into going into it. The pursuit of some feeling that they want you to take away. And this film did that for me. I didn't demand as much closure at the end of it as others have. And maybe we'll see another film with Charlotte Rampling and Tom Courtenay called 45. It's about a couple who are celebrating their 45th wedding anniversary. And she finds out that he had a previous wife who died while she was pregnant in a hiking accident. And she discovers that he's secretly going up to the attic and looking at slides of her on that hiking trip. And it throws a many grains of sand into the machinery of their relationship. And there's no closure to that movie. And if you have an interest in it, it's not necessarily a happy movie, but she's great, he's great, and it's like relationships happen, especially over 45 years, as we all know. And it leaves you somewhere that's not nowhere, but it's somewhere. And by the way, those of you who, I had a conversation in chat this morning with Tufan, the Israeli guy in our Torah study group, and he said, I'm torn. I like to wear my kippah, but I'm afraid it's going to cause me harm in these horrible times, and I have a family to worry about. What should I do? And it's like, my layman's advice to him was, you're engaged in a worthy conversation. Both concerns have merit, and you should engage in them constantly, because you'll change and the world will change. So there's no answer. You have to live with the insecurity of keeping two conflicting ideas in your head at the same time. And that helped him, because I wish I could take my own advice, but it's easier when you give it to somebody else. But films can do this to us, and you can't ask too much of them, but then again, sometimes they come along and they really shake your tree. So if nobody has anything else to say, I want to thank you for a great discussion. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, even if you didn't totally get it or appreciate the ending. It's a process, and I learned something new about how people see films every day. So I thank you for helping me too. I don't have another film to announce for 2 weeks. We're going to skip Thanksgiving weekend because you're all distracted. But we'll resume, I think, after Thanksgiving weekend. And there are a ton of really good films coming up. There's Armageddon Time, about starring Anthony Hopkins and Anne Hathaway. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he bonds with his grandson, who's involved in the contemporary Black Jewish controversy in Brooklyn. Very relevant to the present, but it also reflects upon Jewish history. I'm looking forward to that. I've been looking at the guy's other 3 films, and I'm not going to make you watch them, but I wanted to see what there is. Jewish filmmaker of Ukrainian parents, born here years ago. He's in his 50s now, I think. And so that's coming up. And there are all kinds of other films. I won't run them down for you, but the end of the year is always a great time for viewing films. We just have to wait till they stream, and that's what I've been waiting on. And because I didn't have something I thought was right, I was looking and I found this one for us. So it happens sometimes. Now, there are 2 films I want to see, I want to show, and I realize it could be a very sensitive issue for us. They're both about Alzheimer's. They're really true, honest, and fully felt depictions. The first is Julianne Moore won an Oscar called Still Alice, about an academic in her 40s or 50s who gets early onset Alzheimer's. And it's really about the effect of the Alzheimer's on her family, right? Although you see it on her too. It's a progressive film. And then there's another film also starring Anthony Hopkins about Alzheimer's, where it was a stage play, and it's called The Father. And it's told out of time. So you never know. It helps you share his confusion.
You don't know what's real and what isn't in the movie.
Yeah, right. And he mistakes people, and women change their blouses in the middle of a scene, and what happened there? No, it's another thing he's remembering. And it recreates the experience of Alzheimer's for those of us who do not have it, so that we can empathize with the confusion and the chaos that it brings to their lives. And I have a friend who is approaching 70, and she has Alzheimer's, and I had a coffee with her husband, and I said, so does she talk about it much? And he said, well, a few months ago, she said, I can't take this any longer. And you think about that. There's an awareness of yourself slipping away. This is a terribly important subject for those of us whose lives have been touched by Alzheimer's, and those of us who may be touched in the future. It's really all about empathy and imagining, having the humility to imagine what somebody else's life is like. It's what Alan suffers from, the nearsightedness in this film. And I just hesitate to program it because I know some people may not want to see them. So I would appreciate an email from you for your tolerance of watching them. These are both superior films, really top-notch filmmaking. The Anthony Hopkins one is a little harder to follow because it's told out of time. The Julianne Moore is a definite three-hanky movie. And she's just terrific in it. But you understand what it's like. And these are important films. Susan Nanis and I were trying to pull together an Alzheimer's Awareness Weekend where we'd show these. And there's a congregant, Elizabeth Stearns, who's lost her mother to Alzheimer's. And she's very tied in with a charity that supports Alzheimer's research and treatment and education. And she was going to pull together top experts in the field for us. So maybe that'll happen when the old university campus is finally renovated and we can accommodate people. This would be a synagogue-wide thing, but one or both of those films would definitely be a part of it. But we can certainly see them here if you have interest. You know, I think they're very fine films for us to discuss, but they're not easy to watch. On the other hand, sometimes those films are just great. They feel like you really earned it after you watched it. So let me know, just email me if you have any interest in that. And you'll hear from me in about 2 weeks with another email for the next film. But thank you all. Thanks for joining us, you newcomers, the regulars. It's always good to see you. And hopefully in 3 weeks, we'll get together again. Thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.